Good morrow to you all. You have fallen on Bard Times.
Brought to you by RHUL Shakespeare Society.
You've joined me, Cassie Dixon.
And me, Jack Hardman, as we bear some bardy truths.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Bard Times. I'm Cassie Dixon, I will be your host for today, and we will talk about world cinema and Shakespeare. Here with me today is Subhan Ahmed Haye, and welcome. First of all.
Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. You recently just became Shakespeare Society's first year rep, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I'm excited to see how things work out for me.
We are very happy to have you on board with us.
Thank you very much.
I remember from your speech initially that you wanted to pursue that inclusivity and diversity that Shakespeare can access. And would you like to tell us about your relationship with Shakespeare and world cinema?
Okay, I'll just start with my relationship to just Shakespeare as a whole. Obviously, year 7 studying a bit of Macbeth, and then it comes back again in year 10 when we're doing it in our GCSEs. I was quite engaged. I'd say humbly that I was more engaged. Not that I was better than the whole class, but I was more engaged than the whole class. My classmates, people who are from my background, they weren't really engaged. They just did it because they had to get the grade, move on to A-levels. Barely anyone from my background took English literature at A-level. I did, and did horribly, but I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it. And international Shakespeare explained to me why Shakespeare is so... why the whole English education system is so obsessed with Shakespeare. I mean, you look at a course, every single English course has Shakespeare. And I didn't really understand why that was. World cinema explained that to me. And then you watch these films and you realize, oh God, like Shakespeare says a lot about not just England, but the whole world and humanity.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. As some of you may already know who are listening, I have a problem with the British school system and how they teach Shakespeare. There's just an invisible line between those who are receiving that education and those who are teaching it. And I'm not saying that it's those who are specifically teaching it who are the problem, but it's just how schools in general approach Shakespearean texts and what they show in schools especially. When Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet came out and they started showing that in schools, and younger generations were suddenly more receptive to the Shakespearean text and language and themes, because what Shakespeare did was write such universal stories. But what do you think of the Shakespearean film adaptations they show in schools these days, and what students could be missing out on by not being shown world cinema adaptations?
Well, I think I'll just talk about the 2 adaptations that I have been shown in my school. So at GCSE for Macbeth, we looked at Roman Polanski's Shakespeare. And the film is a very good adaptation. It's just when it's the only adaptation that you're shown, then it just becomes like, I don't know. And, you can make the argument that, no, you need to spend more time studying it rather than watching Shakespeare. But I'd make the argument that reading Shakespeare is the equivalent of just reading a car manual. You need to watch the play because it's a play. Then there's the A-level one. We watched Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet. I doubt Miss Tyler or Miss Faulkner would be watching, but they were great. They were great teachers. I admit, I was a horrible student, but it's not them that were the problem. It is, as you say, the education system. Because when you reduce Shakespeare to just make sure you get your AO1 and your AO2, it becomes so tedious. And if you reduce Shakespeare to just British adaptations, you miss out on what Shakespeare could mean for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
All those adaptations, most English adaptations are set in the past. So they don't even relate to today. Like Roman Polanski's are set in the past and Kenneth Branagh's. But like Feiechter or Makbul, they're set in modern day India and Kashmir. If someone from my background is listening to how Feiechter feels about the situation of Kashmir, and, then their uncles at home are speaking about it, they can become part of the conversation, only if they know what's happening. So I think that you're missing out on just what Shakespeare means for the contemporary world.
I absolutely agree. Makbul and Feiechter, of course, we'll be talking about later on in the show, but what do you think are the challenges that filmmakers face trying to reach global audiences with Shakespeare?
Of course, it's challenging to translate Shakespeare's themes and plots to modern day. However, there are many aspects of the modern world which have not changed since Shakespeare's time. I think, I know we're going to talk about Haida later on. I want to just talk about this one scene in Haida where Khurram, which is Claudius, proposes to Ghazala, which is Gertrude, and the whole mosque sort of erupts in this sort
Yeah,
of
yeah.
appreciation of what he's doing, as if he's saving her life. That wouldn't make sense in today's context. But for me, someone who's familiar with the Kashmir and the Indian and Pakistani culture, I know for a fact that if something like that were to happen, if, for example, God forbid, my father was to die and my uncle were to come in and give his hand in marriage, I know he would be met with a lot of appreciation, because that's how women are seen in our culture. Unfortunately, they're seen as
Mm.
it's as needing men. They cannot be independent, and I think Hader does that well. So I think, yes, in many ways it's difficult, but unfortunately, it's a good thing. But it's unfortunate that it's so easy to translate to today. It's just like it's embarrassing that we as a society have not moved forward that much.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's on the one hand, you are celebrating the fact that his stories, Shakespeare's stories, are so timeless and they're so easily translatable into modern day context. But on the other hand, as you quite rightly just said, it's embarrassing and it's quite shocking how little we have advanced and how we're making the same mistakes, we're making the same storylines for ourselves, and we're falling into the same traps. The Guardian, back in 2016, did a survey of about 18,000 people across 15 countries, which showed Shakespeare was more popular overall abroad than he was in the UK, which I find really interesting. What is interesting, though, about this study is that India was one of the countries surveyed, and 83% of the population said that they understood Shakespeare, in contrast to only 58% of Britons. Which
Wow,
I know that,
didn't know that. Wow.
yeah, I am quite, I'm not shocked, to be honest, I'm not shocked. But two films that we've already mentioned, Hader and Maqbool by Vishal Bhardwaj, two out of the three films that he's made of Shakespeare plays. I know that you're quite a big fan of this
Yes.
trilogy.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
as a whole, do you think that they're successful translations? And if so, why do you think they're successful translations?
So Omkara is an adaptation of Othello, and it is his best adaptation. Like, I was watching it because I was rewatching it for this podcast, and I watched it with my parents,
Yeah,
and that film, I think, single-handedly made them more feminist, because the story of Othello is about how weak a woman's reputation can be. A single stain on it can make it like a single stain on a woman's reputation, especially in modern India, could ruin her life. It could come back to haunt her, and it's unfortunate that that's how it is. But Omkara really details how that is. So Omkara is definitely successful in that regard. Maqbool is successful because, I mean, it's just a good adaptation, adds a little bit and brings it to modern India, and
yeah,
I think that's why perhaps the amount of people who are passionate about Shakespeare in India is high, is because it brings it to modern day, and it's so much more easy to understand rather than the ye old English. And then, once you've gotten interested in that, then you're sort of motivated to go back and study the ye old English. In the film, Hader, which is Hamlet, describes chutzpah as if someone was to rob a bank, and then as soon as he's taken all the money, go to the other counter and try and open a bank account. It's this audacity that he's talking about, and Vishal Bhardwaj uses this idea of audacity to criticize,
mm,
India and Pakistan's constant um, claim over Kashmir.
yeah,
No one really cares about Denmark in modern day. I mean, really, if Denmark's not in the news, and Kashmir, that is a place that you can bring all those themes to.
yeah.
So I think that's brilliant what Bhardwaj did.
I agree. I am a little bit obsessed with Hamlet. Having that as my favorite play, of course, has made me want to watch every single adaptation possible, and I have watched quite a lot of adaptations of it. But Hader is by far, I think, the most raw and visceral production of Hamlet that I've watched, and I think that's something that all the other productions I've seen has missed, that emotional intensity. Now, Hamlet he's a dramatic boy. He is, for lack of a better academic term, and he's showing all of his emotions, but it's also very internal, and I love the psychological complexity of Hamlet as a character. What's missing, I find, from other productions I've seen is the emotional side to that.
Yeah.
And I think Hader does that incredibly well. A big portion of it is centered around the civilian disappearances. And there is one shot, I think, that touched me so much more than anything I've ever seen with Hamlet. And that is one of the shots of Hader standing in a peaceful protest and a silent protest with other people holding up signs saying, "Where is my father?" or "Where is my brother? Where is my son?" And just that shot alone is so emotionally raw. And I think Bardwaj does such an amazing job at taking those themes and putting them in a modern context. So we spoke a little bit earlier about the representation of women in his films. So what struck me about Makbul and Hader especially was the changing of the Lady Macbeth, Ophelia and Gertrude characters, and I found them so much more engaging, to be honest, than I have done. So what do you think has been changed for those female characters?
Well, for one, in Hader, Ophelia, who is called Ashia, is way less submissive. She's a journalist, so
Yes.
she has a job, and she's not reliant on the men in her family. And there's a not lovely scene, but there's a well done scene. There's a well done scene at the start where, what were their names? Oh God, Polonius. Oh my God, I did the A level. Polonius and Laertes, which is Liaquat here, are trying to convince Ophelia Ashia to not meet with Hader. She storms off. Honestly, I mean, I've seen in our culture, it's there's many
Yeah.
brothers who command their sister to not meet this boy or whatever. It's quite disgusting, and it's good that Bardwaj has brought attention to that, and then in Makbul, it adds to because Lady Macbeth is a character who is quite manly, I think I would say, but they made her even more intimidating here because she has the guts to make someone who she's having an affair with kill her husband, and that adds to the creepiness of the character. And just I think it's quite clever what Bardwaj has done with his female characters.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. What I love is how much more agency they have in his films. Not that they didn't have agency in the plays, but he made agency out of their current situations, which is what I love. In Makbul, Nimi, who is the Lady Macbeth equivalent, she has so much more agency because of her situation. She is the mistress, the wife figure in the mafia. What I love about Makbul, I'm just going to interrupt myself, is that it feels like The Godfather meets
Yeah.
Macbeth,
Yes.
which I love. Even down to the Abaji having a Marlon Brando impression
Yeah.
going on
So
almost.
it's
I
no
don't know if that
wonder
was...
it's no wonder the kids in India love Shakespeare now.
I thought that was brilliant. But I think Nimi is a perfect example of how you translate a character into another culture, because she's what Lady Macbeth had, which Nimi didn't, was power to begin with. Nimi is fighting for her life. She needs to survive every day to stay in favour, to stay at his right-hand side. She doesn't really have any power. I don't know, she has sexual power, but that's about it. And what I found really interesting is that she was drawn to the very violent and masculine Makbul, whose traits obviously were there in the play, but they've been amplified in this mafia crime underworld of Mumbai. And Nimi is attracted to that, and I found that so interesting because she takes his gun and toys with it, and it's that recklessness and that she has a very recklessness of life, and her attitude, her carefree attitude, is taken one step up from that manipulation that you see in the original play. onto the subject of her being dominated by these male figures in the film of McBull. So what have these cultural changes helped to emphasize or explore thematically from the original plays, do you think?
Before I go on about the culture, I just wanted to say that Bardwaj just added our culture into Hader. I'm going to look at when Hader's father is in jail.
Yeah.
How they handled the death of Hader's father was quite different.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I think they wanted to do that because they wanted to emphasize, the loss of family in Kashmir, and that shot you talked about where he's standing there, where's my father, where's my son? I think that's why they did that. But there's two really good examples. One is there's a famous poet from my country called Feiechter Ahmed Haye, and that's the songs that his dad sings.
Oh.
And the lyrics are written by him. So I think it's just brilliant that it's Shakespeare, but then there's also a homage to our own brilliant poets and that sort of thing.
That.
But then there's also how they handled Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
Oh, yeah.
Which I wonder, what do you think about that?
I as soon as I saw them dancing in the shop, I was like, oh yeah, I know who those two guys are. I think they're obviously there for comic relief, as it's plain to see, but at the same time, they're almost funny in an unfunny way, and you find them bumbling and they're stupid characters, and I love them for it.
You kind of do feel sorry for them because they're too stupid for their own good, and that's how you feel about Rosencrantz Guildenstern. But what I wanted to say is what you wouldn't know is that who they're obsessed with is an actor called Salman Khan, who I can describe to you as the Indian equivalent to maybe Vin Diesel, I guess.
Okay.
And it's like he's got really diehard fans in India, and they're just the worst part of our country. They really are, because they're just so obsessed and they think like they're manly. And this is a really good like caricature of masculinity in some parts of our country. And I think it's good that they brought this along to show how stupid it is. And what I thought was interesting was that Bardwaj explores the theme of revenge in Kashmir. Should the people of Kashmir go out and seek revenge for what they've been through and that sort of thing? And there's an interesting part where I think it was an imam. I can't really remember what he was, but he talked about how Gandhi won India's freedom through peaceful methods.
Yeah.
And a gun will only bring you an intiqam, which is the word for revenge in our language. And I don't think Hader is there in that scene, but we as the audience know, what we've just heard, and that adds to Hader's or Hamlet's dilemma that should we pursue revenge. And I was interesting how, Bardwaj uses our culture to further the conversation about whether revenge is worth it or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it was interesting what he did with the ghost. I don't know if you, because the ghost is a living person, but at the same time it's weird what he did. Irfan Khan was the ghost who played Maqbool as well.
He recently died this year.
That's what I was going to say. He had an illness for the past 2 years, and he's been battling it, and sadly he passed away. And he is a
great actor.
Very great actor. And I'm just saying that I'm just thinking about the younger me and my friends. If we were to go into year 7 English class and the teacher says, all right, we're going to be exploring Macbeth through the eyes of Indians, and we're going to look at Irfan Khan, I'm telling you, my eyes would have just widened and I would have paid attention to class and got on A stars and everything.
I really like what you said about the dilemma that Hamlet has in the play with the to be or not to be, and is translated into the film with a wider context and meaning, and there's so much more weight to it. But that's what Hader does amazingly well. And one of the sequences which I absolutely love is the play within a play, because obviously dance and song sequences in Bollywood films are quite, they're normal, but of course it's quite a tradition in Shakespearean plays anyway to have songs and dances.
I will say that when the film came out in 2014, I remember that it was like that song was on the charts. Like the whole country was jamming to it. It feels like it uses different cultures' dances and the whole puppets and all that. The best thing is that little flick of the dirt he does at the end.
Oh
That
yeah,
just makes you
that's
feel like,
brilliant.
yes.
So what's really interesting, what you said, was the intermingling of different performance styles, which is seen in Akira Kurosawa's Throne of Blood, which of course is Macbeth, which draws a lot on traditional Japanese no performance, which is amazing. But of course, Kurosawa also did Ran in 1985, which is an adaptation of King Lear. But in the same way that Bhardwaj has translated those universal themes to an Indian culture, what do you think Kurosawa's adaptations did with integrating into Japanese culture? What do you think is successful about them? Because of course they're period pieces, they're not translated into modern day time. So what do you think is different about that? Do you think they still work as adaptations?
It's a little harder for me to say because I'm not, Japanese, so I don't have that much knowledge as I do for Indian and Pakistani culture. But, everyone loves samurais and swords and that sort of thing. And with that, I think it's very successful. But I just want to touch on Throne of Blood in particular because that is the scariest and probably the best adaptation of Macbeth I've ever seen. I genuinely felt creeped out watching that. In Throne of Blood, literally, like you've got like Lord Waishizu trying to bring his wife to her senses, and this little scream that he lets out, and then he just drops in like, he knows he's lost, and that just like that sticks with me. Things like that, and then there's the arrows at the end.
Oh,
and
that's
screaming.
amazing.
Like
That's
that
such
scene
a
goes
good
on
sequence.
for long.
Yeah.
I guarantee if any other director / actor was doing that scene, it would have felt like it's a comedy, but he made it scary for some reason. Yeah, it's amazing what he's done.
I love the translation of Shakespearean monarchs into different settings because they're so, like Hamlet, they're very internalized and there's so much to play with the royal psyche. And especially with the depiction of the Lady Macbeth equivalent in Throne of Blood. With her husband, she barely moves at all. When she is alone, however, that's when she moves, and she moves with such purpose, almost like it's quite animalistic actually. And because of that stark difference between going from her not moving at all to her moving in a very stylized and quite theatrical manner, it's quite creepy and unnerving, and it's off-putting for an audience to watch.
I don't think there's any difference in her and the witch in the way they move and speak. I just realized that.
Yeah, I think that's
pretty cool.
That is cool. I think that is down to the movement of no. So in terms of contemporary British stage productions and film productions, what do you think of multicultural Shakespearean productions as a whole, where they integrate different traditions and performance styles and cultural references from other cultures?
It's good to have different cultures, most definitely, because Vishal Bhardwaj and Kurosawa are brilliant examples of how different cultures should be mixed in. I personally think that enough has been done for the original Shakespeare. I think more should be done now for different cultures, because I think my favorite adaptation of like original Shakespeare is the Hamlet with David Tennant in it.
Oh, that's brilliant.
That's brilliant.
Yes.
But I just think like if it's not that, then other than that, I think we should be focusing on like international, and even that was like kind of a modern adaptation because he's wearing a t-shirt, which I don't think Hamlet would wear. So that's adding more in. So I think we should enough with the Kenneth Branaghs and the Roman Polanski. I think we should try and make it more different now.
I think I agree with you. I am not I'm not a traditionalist when it comes to Shakespeare, and I think especially when it comes to reaching younger generations and audiences and students, we need to look beyond just basic Kenneth Branagh adaptations, as good as they are.
Which is good, yes. But
yes, we're not slandering Kenneth Branagh here, but I think schools shouldn't be afraid of showing Kurosawa or Bhardwaj in secondary schools. I know for a fact I didn't start studying, or I wasn't aware of these world cinema adaptations until university, and that's quite shocking in itself. So thank you, Shakespeare on Film. that module opened my eyes. But what do you think we can hope for these sort of adaptations in the future in terms of reaching wider audiences?
I wanted to add first, before I talk about what they can add, what we can hope for, is there's an actor I really admire called RHUL Ahmed. Don't know if you've heard of him. He delivered a really good speech in the House of Commons about inclusivity and diversity, and he was talking about how it really matters that seeing someone, for a black person to see, like the new Spider-Man game that's come out with a black Spider-Man in it, it's important. Because I saw a video on Twitter when the game was announced. There was a black streamer, and he actually started crying on stream because they're actually doing this for him, and it matters. It really matters.
Yeah.
And Riz Ahmed was making the argument that children who go on to a life of crime and that sort of thing, a reason for why they do that is because they don't see themselves reflected in their lessons. So if you're learning about Macbeth, a white person, or like I said with Wuthering Heights, if you're learning about Heathcliff, but it's very slightly mentioned that he might be dark-skinned, you're not going to think, okay, yeah, but I'm just learning this for the grade. It has nothing to do with me. I'm not going to learn anything from it. World cinema not only allows us to understand Shakespeare better, but also other cultures. And it's a big step for us to become much more aware of different likes and dislikes, and and if we just learn about each other, I think that's it. But the most adapted play in India is Romeo and Juliet, but they're all sort of like in denial about themselves. And I think the whole Guildenstern Rosencrantz Salman thing that they did, it's like there's more to Shakespeare than just love and I need you and that sort of thing. So we need to have enough of that. We need to stop with that, especially with here in Britain as well. But what I want to see more of is, from Britain, obviously, I want to see more adaptations of like plays like Measure for Measure, and something that would respect the lives of modern women in the way that Bhardwaj respected the lives of modern Kashmir. So now I would like to see adaptations for more female-centered stories like Measure for Measure, like Tessa the D'Urbervilles, and that's what I'd like to see in the future.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think I don't really know what else to say about that, but I think you just said it all there. Brilliant. I think we'll leave it there for now. And thank you so much for joining me and talking about this. This has been fascinating.
No, thank you for having me on. It means a lot to be invited to something like this.
I loved hearing your opinions, and hopefully we can do more about world cinema and non-Western productions in the future.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Subhan and to those at home who have joined me today for this episode. This has been Cassie Dixon. Stay safe, and in the words of the bard himself, we are such stuff as dreams are made on.